Well, Laura, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me again. I'm so excited to be back.
I'm excited to have you back. I feel like, oh, this is a chance for me to do it over because you were episode number 75. It was April of 2019,
Oh,
just before the
yeah.
launch of your amazing podcast, The Only One in the Room,
Thank
um,
you.
which is tremendously successful. I'm so excited for you guys. You're reaching a lot of people. What does it feel like to just be so amazing? What is that
Well,
like?
I don't know what it feels like to be so amazing, but I will tell you that it's not something that Scott's my partner, my producer, uh,
Hun.
my person. When in January of 2019, we didn't think that we would be podcasters, putting out episodes every week and getting this many downloads and reaching these many people. It was just not, it wasn't what we expected. So it's absolutely incredible to be in this place where we're 3.5 years later and we get to, like you said, reach the people that we do and tell these amazing stories.
Yeah, I really feel like that's really the point, right?
Yeah.
Like to have an impact and help people feel more connected and, maybe alleviate some unnecessary suffering, right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So congratulations. You're doing
Yeah.
amazing work. But you always have. I remember talking to you on our initial conversation where we were talking about some posts that you wrote that had gone viral.
Yeah.
And what a cool experience that was.
That was amazing too. Like the first one was in 2018, and that particular, I was HuffPost, and that essay was the reason that we have the podcast. I was the only one in the room. I was the only Black person at a 600-person retreat. I wrote about that experience. It went viral. And so the idea for the podcast was born out of that.
That's beautiful. And
Yeah.
actually, I watched the TED talk that you did. I'm going to leave a link to it. But
Thank
it
you.
was, yeah, I loved the way you were able to tell that whole story. And I heard some things in that TED talk that I hadn't heard previously about, and I had some secondhand embarrassment as a white presenting. I'm half Mexican, half, white, whatever. But when the lady at the event,
Yeah.
the redhead lady started crying and set the assignment aside to try, I get what she was trying to do, but
Yes,
the embarrassment I felt for her was like, oh my gosh, that she made you feel even worse by.
she did. She did. But like you said, she was very well intentioned. She was.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
was. What's the road to hell paved with?
Good intentions.
Good intentions.
That's what they say. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just, and I appreciated the grace that you gave her and
Mm.
all of us, really, because I remember asking you, like, I'm going to ask you some dumb questions, and you're like, I'm a safe space, ask me your questions,
Yeah.
because I don't want to I never want to make anybody feel bad. Maybe not
Right.
never. When I'm driving, I'm an asshole. that's that's a whole nother thing.
Right.
um but yeah, it's like, oh, there's so much, like, we need to be inclusive and be, just all this stuff, right?
Mhm.
So how do we be supportive and not alienate people and make them feel worse, right?
Yes. And I think, like taking her, for instance, we were sharing a writing assignment with each other. We had 5 minutes to do so. And like you said, she set her writing aside in favor of telling me how she felt about the plight of African American people in this country, and was letting me know how sorry she felt for me because I was Black. So the first thing she should have done is said, would it be okay if we discuss this instead of the assignment? I would have said, absolutely no, this will not be okay.
Absolutely not.
We will read the assignments. But
Yeah,
she didn't ask for my permission. And that's really the first misstep in that conversation we had.
right. And also, I kind of wonder if she felt not bad that you're Black, but that we're just such assholes sometimes. You know what I
Well,
mean?
yeah, I think she was trying to apologize. Um,
Apologize. Yeah.
but she didn't know me.
No,
I'm not the one. We don't have a connection.
I don't know
So,
you.
so don't come to me with all this kind of emotional baggage. But what she was doing was giving it to me to carry.
Oh, she was unburdening herself.
Yes, that's not cool.
That is not cool. That's like
Yeah.
step 9 stuff, right? Like you don't
Yes.
unburden
Yes,
yourself at the expense of someone.
exactly.
My goodness. Well, listen, you have come a long way since then. You've been doing a tremendous amount of work in the recovery community space,
Mm.
not only with the podcast, but we're here to talk about your book because your book is it available for? I am special. I got a special sneak peek. I feel
Yes.
special. Um, but the name of your book is Stash My Life in Hiding.
Yeah.
Ooh, but we're
Yes.
all in hiding a little bit, though, right?
I I think so. I think
Yeah.
everybody is in hiding a little bit. And to answer the first question you're asking, it's available for pre-order now.
Pre-order. Okay, awesome.
Yes. And so anyone can go on. Hopefully you'll have a link in the show notes or
Heck
people
yeah, I will.
can
Yeah.
pre-order. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a Simon and Schuster. Oh my gosh. Simon and Schuster.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
so great. That's a great
Yeah, it's really
publication.
cool. It's really
Yeah,
cool. They've been
congratulations. Yeah.
amazing. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you.
they're lucky to have you, honestly. How long did it take you to write the book?
I started writing in so what happened was, I'll try to make this really brief.
Take as long as you want.
Okay. HarperCollins, which is one of the big 5 publishing houses, they posted on Instagram during the summer of 2020, right after George Floyd's murder. They said, we will take submissions from unagented Black authors up until August 27th, 2020, which is my birthday.
Oh,
So I thought, this is serendipitous. I'm going to go ahead. I didn't have, they needed 30 pages and a query letter. So I didn't have 30 pages or a query. So it was June. I set about writing it. I wrote my 30 pages. I wrote the query. I had the women, amazing women from my writing group, shout out to them, read over it, give me notes. I submitted it on my birthday and I got an auto response that said, thank you for your fiction submission. And my stomach dropped because, of course, this is memoir. This is my life that I was writing about. So I knew it wouldn't be considered. And then my friend Holly Whitaker, who is an author, she wrote the book Quit Like a Woman. She's one of my really, really, really dear friends. And she read the pages and sent them to her agent in November of 2020. Her agent signed me 2 days later and asked me, how soon can you get this done? So I started writing that day from 11 to 7 every weekday. And I turned it into her in April of 2021.
that's amazing. Oh, you turned in the first draft?
Yes, that I
Okay.
turned in the first draft April 2021.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Did you feel like it just poured out of you, or did it
Yes.
feel like it did? Oh
Yeah.
man, that's how you know it's meant to be.
Yeah. It was, and I write about such a finite period in my life. It's 10 months really that I'm writing
Mhm.
about. So it was not difficult to kind of, if it were my whole life, I probably would have had stops and starts, but because it was just these 10 months and I remember them so well, it was not hard to write. No.
That's amazing. I find that sometimes it's painful to go back and tell those stories again. It's almost like doing a 4-step where you go back to painful times and having to write it all out sort of brings up all those old feelings again, feelings that we want to put to bed and move beyond. So to go back, I know requires a lot of courage, but it's so important to get those stories out there. When I first got sober, there were not any memoirs. There was the big book, that was it. And I think I read somewhere that you wanted to make sure that there was representation from somebody like you for those coming up behind you.
This is true. This is true. Is I had the same experience. I was coming out of the throes of my addiction. I was getting a divorce. This was the summer of 2008. And I was a mom to 2 young boys. And I was getting sober. And, obviously I'm Black. I also have the privilege of coming from a place of privilege. So I have a lot of access and resources that oftentimes don't go hand in hand with an addiction like mine.
Yeah.
So I was looking for experiences like mine to read about, to watch on TV, to, go to the movies and see, like, anything that would give me like the next step or give me hope. And I didn't see anything. I scoured bookshelves, and at that time, Blockbuster shelves, because there was Blockbuster then.
It was
Um,
before Netflix.
right, which is video rental for those of you who don't know.
Right.
It was TV
Listen.
rental then, I guess. Or DVD, sorry,
Yeah.
DVD rental. But
My audience is the middle-aged crowd. We're all good.
okay, good. But so yeah, so I found nothing, and I just, I kind of like felt my way through the whole thing and got through it, and decided at some point that I was going to write about my experience so that the next person wouldn't have to feel their way through and, hit the same pitfalls that I did, hopefully. Or if they do, they would know how to get out.
Yeah, and I think there's so much value in finding somebody that you can relate to, right? Because I feel like so many of us show up to recovery with this terminal uniqueness,
Yes.
right? We're all kind of bringing a unique set of experiences that make us feel unique. But what's interesting? It seems like the feelings are all the same. Like
Yeah.
we all cry when we're sad, we get angry, like all the feelings, the circumstances are different, but the feelings are all the same. And it's that connection that is so important. So I'm so excited for this book to be out in the wilds, as they say, so
Me
that
too.
everyone can feel connected.
Yeah. Oh, there's an opportunity for it. More of
Yeah,
an opportunity than before it existed.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's stories are important. I do want to talk a little bit about, we're going to definitely jump into the book, but I'd like to start with, I guess we're not really starting, we're kind of into it already, but I like to play a little game called the lightning round, just to
Yeah.
sort of front load the episode with some resources. So did you have a favorite book that helped you when you first got sober?
Yeah. Traveling Mercies by Anne Lamott.
I
Yeah.
love her.
I love her. That book it's actually the only book that they allowed me to bring with me into treatment.
Really?
They confiscated all the other ones and said I could have them when I got out, but they wouldn't let me bring them in. And so I read it over and over and over again while I was there.
I have not heard of that one. What was the one that she wrote about her son?
He's in this, but this is more about her sobriety journey.
Her sobriety journey. I'll have to
Yeah.
check that out.
And it's interesting because Anne Lamott is white, but what she used to get sober was a Black church community.
Oh, that's right.
So it's like the opposite of my experience. So it was really cool to read. Yeah.
What books wouldn't they let you bring in? Do you
I don't even
remember?
remember. I had a lot of magazines. I like
Ah,
had my Vogues and Bazaars and like Elle. They wouldn't let me bring any of those in, but I don't remember what other books I was trying to bring in. If it wasn't about recovery, I couldn't bring it in.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're there for a single purpose. That makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
Okay, Traveling Mercies. I'm gonna have to check that out. Do you have a go-to mantra or quote that you live by? Maybe an idea that has helped you consistently over your sobriety?
I don't think so. I think I think it's
No.
changed. Like,
That's a first.
I mean, I don't know. I might have to come back to you with that, but I don't think I do. I think I discover these things in recovery meetings and in books and just talking to people, and like that will become my mantra for until I hear the next great thing. But
Yeah,
but I don't know that I've had one kind of creed that I've lived by since
right.
I got sober.
Since you got sober. Yeah, I feel like the one that keeps coming up for me lately is like progress, not perfection.
Mm,
Right? Like just
yeah,
keep it moving. My girlfriend and I joke around, just keep it moving.
yeah, I
When
like
things
that.
get hard, just keep it moving. Um, well, that's fair. Do you have a regular self-care or recovery routine, whether it's like a morning practice or do you have like a weekly schedule you like to follow?
Yeah, I call them my non-negotiables. And so this is my morning. I talked a little bit about Scott before,
Mhm.
partner, person, boyfriend, producer. So we met the hour we checked into treatment.
That's so funny.
We dated for 6 years and then he moved in. And so we're a blended family, his two girls, my two boys, who are all grown now. And so in the morning, I'll get up and I will go downstairs and meditate. And I will start his coffee before I start meditating. When I finish meditating, his coffee's done. I put 3 ice cubes in it so it's not too hot, bring it up to him, go back downstairs and work out. And that's how I start my day every day. And then the other important piece of that is if I can, I'll go back up if he's still in bed. And sometimes he's up and going by this point, but if he's still in bed, I'll go chat with him in our bedroom. And if he is in his office, I'll go into his office and we'll just kind of start our day by saying, what's in front of you, what's going on, how, just checking in with each other. And that's very centering for me. So those three things, the meditation, the working out, and the checking in, and then I can really start my day.
Oh, that's beautiful. God, that's so funny. I do the 3 ice cubes things too.
Really?
Yeah, specifically 3.
That's so strange.
Yeah.
Well, it works though, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, we use those, those Contigo cups,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and it keeps the coffee hot. So I get my husband's coffee,
Yeah.
3, you know. I do it for him
That's
because
awesome.
if he spills it, he gets very upset.
Oh yeah, yeah,
It's so
forget about it.
funny. Yeah. That's cute. All right. So, and are you 12-step oriented?
I am.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
still do a regular set of meetings every
I
week
do.
or?
I do. Yeah. I have a meeting that I started with my best friend in our recovery community, and she and I really wanted to study the steps. So we made it a true step study, and
Mm.
that's on Wednesdays. We actually have Scott and I have a meeting in our home
Oh, nice.
on the weekend where we study the big book, and then I'm either speaking or just attending other meetings throughout the week,
How
speaking out
many?
or attending. I'd say 3 to 4
Okay.
altogether, including the one that we have at home.
Including the ones. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do your step study meeting, is that like out of the 12 and 12?
it is.
That's my favorite.
It is. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Okay.
You have
So
to come if you're
that's a,
ever in LA.
what's that?
You have to come by if you're ever in LA.
Oh, I gotta come by LA. The way all the cool people are in LA. Do you know Hannah Sword and Patrick O'Neill? There's
Yes,
like a bunch of writers that
yes,
are out
yeah.
there.
It's a
Yeah.
really big, sober writing community.
Yeah. Anna
Yeah,
David's out there. And so I finished my first draft. So I'm trying to join the club.
nice.
I don't want to tell you that I just got some feedback. And so now I feel like I got to rewrite the whole thing, but then
Ah,
there it is.
get more feedback then.
Get
Seek a
just keep,
second opinion.
is that like answer shopping?
Yeah,
Just keep
yes,
asking until you get the answer you want.
yes.
That's awesome. Um, what's one thing you wish you knew when you first got sober?
One thing I wish I knew.
What would you tell your
Oh,
younger self?
I know what I wished I knew. I wish I knew that when I was rigorously honest, better things would happen.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I was so afraid of being rigorously honest because I thought bad things would happen if I was. I wouldn't be able to protect myself if I were rigorously honest.
Well,
And
that
what
makes
I've
sense.
discovered is that better things happen when I am.
Better things happen. That makes sense, right? Typically people lie because they're trying to protect themselves,
Yeah.
whether it's image management or revealing too much of the truth to somebody who's not safe.
Or
It's
people pleasing.
yeah, that's gross, but true.
Yeah.
People pleasing.
Yes.
That's really good. Yeah, rigorously honest. And I've been asking people to share spiritual experience stories because I feel like people that are newly sober and wrestling with this higher power or God or whatever you want to call it, don't understand or need. I think it's helpful to have stories of what a spiritual experience is so they can start identifying that in their own lives. When I was asking about it earlier, it sounded like you had something that came up right away.
I do. I do. I have one. It's one of my go-to stories that I tell in the recovery community. I often start off with this story because it kind of sets the table for my journey. And it starts with my mom, who is 20 years my senior. She's 78, and she's a hiker. She walks every morning. And one of her hiking buddies was a forest ranger who would kind of regale her with tales of cleaning up after forest fires and, like, what adventure he'd been on that week. And he was telling her about cleaning up after a specific forest fire. And he was walking through this still smoldering forest. And he happened upon a female hawk who was petrified with her wings open. She had been burned to death. And his heart caught, in his throat, and he bent down and lifted her underneath her wings as gingerly as possible. And behind her were 3 live baby hawks. So my mom tells me this story. I'm still in active addiction at the time that she tells me this story. And I'm overwhelmed by emotion because I understand to my core what that is. That was maternal instinct. She gave her life to protect her babies, which is absolutely something that I have. It is my strongest instinct. It's stronger than self-preservation. I know this because I was killing myself with drugs and alcohol, and I still wanted to be in my children's lives. But what I realized at that moment was that this strongest instinct of mine, my maternal instinct, had been overshadowed by something even more powerful. And that is what I call my alcoholism. And in that moment, I realized I needed something even more powerful than my alcoholism, which was stronger than my maternal instinct, if I was going to find my instinct for self-preservation again. So the search for something bigger than this juggernaut, this monster that was my alcoholism, began that day.
That's amazing. That is really amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Ooh, I love those stories. And it's so interesting that we can have so many of those stories. And then once you hear one, you start looking back at your life at the things that created the pivot,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, that's like those moments of clarity. It's like, what's it gonna take for me to finally change or get help? And that's a beautiful story, beautiful example. I want to go back to actually, maybe we could talk a little bit about kind of how we got here. I want to talk about the book, and I picked out a few stories because you wrote the book. Love it. And like this 3-part act, right?
Yes.
It's the I have the titles in front of me, if you don't mind me looking for a second.
I don't have
So
it in front of me.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So it's in 3 parts, Circling the Drain,
Right.
The Meadows, and Homecoming. And I
Yes.
picked out a story from each part that I want to talk about. But I would love to hear the stories that you love the most, like what were the pivotal moments for you. So maybe in part 1, well, I'm not sure what makes more sense. Do you want to talk a little bit about your story and how we got here? Or do you want to talk about the stories from the book?
I mean, I think we can, because I think it's one and the same,
Okay.
right? Yeah, because
Probably.
yeah, the book is the story of how I got here. So
Right.
we can
Good.
just talk about the book.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you want to ask me anything specific about it, or did you want me?
Well, I thought maybe you could share the story of, talk a little bit about boy meets girl, because, that's something I identified with immediately. Like I said, I met my husband, I was 5 months sober, and, so far so good, 28 years later.
Yes.
But I want to hear your story.
Right. Well, Boy Meets Girl was actually, I was 27, 28 years old. And I was someone who had never dated outside my race before. I just honestly didn't see the point. I wanted a Black husband. I wanted Black babies. I wanted to be the poster child for Black love. And then I met this man who was not Black, he was white. And he just really bowled me over. Like, he was really impressive. We had these great conversations, and I found myself becoming like more and more attracted to him. He kept asking me out. Eventually I kept saying yes. And and we became this couple, and I was a publicist at the time, an entertainment publicist. Um he was an actor coming off a really big hit TV show, and he was starting to direct. So we were starting these lives together, and we dated for a while. We dated for almost 4 years before he proposed. And I I thought that I could handle the life I was kind of signing up for. I had grown up poor. I had never graduated from high school. I'd never gone to college. I had kind of made a way for myself in this world of publicity by being hired by someone and then bringing in my own clients. And then I don't even know how I did it, but I had started my own company, and it was actually pretty successful. But nobody knew. Nobody knew that I didn't graduate from high school. Nobody knew that I'd grown up poor, and nobody knew that I hadn't gone to college. There was a year of smoking cocaine with a drug dealer back where I grew up that nobody knew about. That happened when I was like 19 years old. And so I was concealing all these truths from everyone around me successfully. And then I was also trying to seamlessly integrate myself into this world, where I write about how, there was just all this stuff like babies and bridal showers and spa days and shopping sprees, things that I wasn't into at all. I'm still not into them, by the way.
Babies and shopping.
No,
No.
I don't like shopping recreationally. I just don't get the point of it. The spa day is the best way to torture me. Like, if you want to just like make me miserable, make me do a whole spa day and I will be miserable. But the world I was entering, with this man with whom I'd fallen in love and agreed to marry was that world. This is what the women did in that world. And I thought it was either swim or get out of the pool. And I didn't want out. So I decided to do my best to become one of them.
The Julia Roberts,
Yeah,
pretty, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Man, that must have been taken so much energy to try to live out of alignment with who you really are.
Of course. But I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't realize it until I stopped, and how much energy I was saving. That's what
Right.
I just thought that was life. I was always on high alert. I was always hyper vigilant. I was always running. I was always hustling. And that was just how my life was.
Do you feel like that came from a childhood of, I know that this is our second interview, so I know from our
Yeah.
first one and everything
Yeah.
that you had a stepfather that was abusive and you were always
Yes.
on high alert. And that's really interesting. It kind of sets the stage for the rest of your life. I often heard that we recreate our family of origin in our adult life. And, it sounds like the circumstances were vastly different, but sort of the underlying currents of anxiety and high alert were present. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it is. I think what my stepfather did, how his presence in my life really informed how I would work to hide who I was authentically.
Mm.
And the work, and whatever that work looked like at different stages in my life, that's what I did. If I was, I was somebody when I was a little kid, I just bet everything I did rubbed him the wrong way. So there wasn't any way that I could just be myself and live in a peaceful house. So I tried to become the thing that would make him less irritated. And that way the house could be peaceful. And then I just, I that became what I did, everywhere I went. So like you said, it did take a lot of energy, but I just thought this was normal for me.
Right.
This is who I am. I conform to, I'm that chameleon, and I'll become this or I'll become that. Interestingly enough, maybe, I don't know if you'll think it's interesting, but when I was writing this memoir, I interviewed a few people from my childhood, because I wanted to get their perspective on me. And what they all fed back to me was happy-go-lucky, carefree, the best like person to hang around. Everybody wanted you at their sleepovers. Like, so there was that truth as well. I was also that person. And then there was this, which I was hiding. But I think it wasn't just all pretending for me. There was, my authentic self was still there. That laughing, I wake up happy in the mornings. That's like who I am naturally.
Mhm.
That has become more pronounced since I've gotten sober, but it wasn't gone
Right.
when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, when I was in my 20s even. That's like my default setting.
Right. Default is happy. And
Yeah.
then in relationship, it was about people pleasing,
In
maybe.
my relationship with my ex-husband.
Well, I was thinking your relationship with your stepfather kind of taught you to people
Oh,
please, because
yeah.
sometimes like when you're growing up, the predominant man in your life, how you relate is how you learn to relate to men.
Yeah, I don't know if it was people pleasing as much as it was just concealing. Like I didn't go out of my way to win his approval at all.
Hmm.
We were at odds the whole time. I
From
was
the
just
gate,
trying not to
right?
do, yeah, from the gate. I was just trying not to do things that would upset him so that it wouldn't upset the relationship with him and my mother. But I
Right.
wasn't like coming to him and wanting his approval or trying to get him to be proud of me or anything like that.
Damage control.
Yes. Or
Yes.
just like, you don't have to worry about me, basically. I
Yeah.
kind of froze him out.
Froze them out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you meet your husband, your
Yeah.
ex-husband,
Yeah.
now, and you start this life and you're hiding who you really are. Do you feel, and I remember, in reading, there was like a lot of, you talk about having anxiety. It wasn't really like it wasn't about, drugs and alcohol weren't about having a good time. It sounded to me like it was about managing the anxiety and that kind of thing. Is that true?
The anxiety. So I never identified with being an anxious person. I actually still don't. I don't feel like I'm an anxious person, but what I looking back, I think, I don't know, how could I not have been? But I never really felt that way. What was unmanageable for me was sleeping. So I wasn't getting any sleep. And then that made me anxious. Like that
Uh,
would set my I had frayed nerves all day long, and I had
right.
two little kids. That's jumping ahead a little bit.
Okay.
Um, at the time where I was dating my ex-husband, drugs and alcohol weren't really a part of my life. So I wasn't medicating anything because I didn't need to. It wasn't until my babies were born back to back that I started to be like, I need something because I'm losing it here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sleep deprivation is actually a form of torture. Like
Right.
that's a
Right. And
thing.
spa days.
For some people.
For some people. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So we'll fast forward a little bit to, okay, so that's where you were. You have your two boys. They are beautiful, by the way, and they're so tall. Are you
Yeah.
short or are they just super tall?
I am tall.
You
Thank
are tall.
goodness, because my ex-husband's side, they're not very tall. So they got their height from me.
How tall are your boys?
I think Miles is they're like just over 6 and just under 6'3".
Okay.
So
I'm
I'm
short. I'm
almost
5'3".
5'9".
You're 5'9". Okay,
Yeah.
I'm 5'3", so everybody's tall to me.
Yeah, yeah. But they're tall. They're tall. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're beautiful. I love seeing you post pictures on social media and stuff. It's so, yeah,
Love
I'm a
my
mom of
boy.
boys too, so I love
Oh
seeing
yeah. The
the
best.
boys.
Boy mom.
Boy
Hashtag.
moms. Um, so let's fast forward a little bit. So tell me a little bit about what it was like with the using. I mean, you wrote about it so beautifully in the book. There was a moment we were talking about wrestling with the last Ambien and your prescription isn't going to be refilled for a while. And you're like, well, maybe I'll let you tell the story. This is your book.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, that was a
Oh,
recurring theme in my life was,
yeah.
so I was addicted to Ambien, which is a sleeping pill, and most people don't really understand how that happens because presumably you take a sleeping pill and you go to sleep, like how can you really abuse it? But what I had done, first of all, Ambien did something for Ambien, I just want to say, I think is a really great drug for most people. When it's used as prescribed, it does what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be used for 1 to 10 days, one pill per night, depending on what your doctor prescribes, sometimes even half. and it's supposed to reset your system and allow you to get to sleep naturally. That's its proper use. Had I used it like that, it might have been okay for me too. But basically, when I took it, it did something to me that I really liked. So I just immediately wanted more.
Mm,
My first thought after my first Ambien, when I woke up the next morning, was again, please. Like I
mm,
couldn't wait to go to sleep again that night. And that continued on for years. Like sleep was in my desired state instead of being awake. And
mm,
so I built up a physical tolerance to it that was pretty insatiable. Like I really couldn't take enough to get that feeling back that I was chasing. But I could take enough to knock me out, but I wouldn't get the feeling before I got knocked out. So it was always this kind of dance for me. I became an amateur pharmacist and like seeing if I could mix it with Benadryl and boost it with vodka, like would I get that feeling before I passed out? And so what would happen is I would get I didn't actually get them from dealers or anything. I got them from doctors, which meant I had to have more than one doctor. It's called doctor shopping. It's not recommended. It's actually, I don't even know if it's possible anymore because of how prescriptions are issued at this point.
um,
But then I could get different prescriptions for different doctors for the exact same medication. And still I ran out. And so that scene that you're talking about is I'm in the bathroom and there's one pill left and I don't have a refill for 4 or 5 days. And I am just, I mean, I'm out of my mind with worry about how this is going to go down because I know it won't be enough. And I know that I should like break it in half and save it. And I also know that I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to take the pill and I'm going to be miserable and it's not going to do anything to me, but I can't do anything else because I'm so addicted at that point.
oh man, I absolutely relate to that. Like wanting desperately not to,
Yes.
and running out and managing and just the jonesing for, oh, it's, man, it's hell.
Yes.
I absolutely relate to that. So what was the turning point for you? What was it the seizure that happened that was like, was that your pivotal point? Like something has to change?
So yeah, I had 2 grand mal withdrawal seizures. That was
Oof.
right after that, actually. I had run out. I was out for a week or so. So I didn't have anything in my system. I never drank when I wasn't taking Ambien because I only liked it to boost the pill. It didn't really do any good for me otherwise. So my system was completely clean. I wasn't sleeping because I didn't have Ambien. I couldn't sleep without it. And a week later, I had 2 grand mal withdrawal seizures, and it was a huge surprise to me. I didn't understand what that was. I didn't know that was something that was possible or plausible for someone like me. The doctors were also confused by it because they did a tox screen and I didn't have anything in my system. So they didn't, I don't have epilepsy. So they didn't understand what caused it. What they determined was that it was an abrupt cessation of the Ambien coupled with the fact that I wasn't sleeping. So the remedy was to make sure that I never ran out of Ambien again. And so I got an override that the state of California was supposed to honor and continually refill my pills anytime I needed them so that I wouldn't have those seizures again, which spiraled me into a very dark place. So to answer your question, no, the seizures were not my bottom. My using continued for quite a while after the seizures. My bottom was not very eventful. It was 4th of July and I was supposed to take my kids to watch the fireworks. And I feigned a headache and had the neighbors take them instead because I was in withdrawal and I needed to knock myself out. I woke up an hour later after taking a dosage which should have knocked me out for the night. I was wide awake. I had peed the bed. So I had wet myself for the first time. And that was one of the lines I said I was never going to, like, if this happens, I'm definitely getting help. And my kids came back and I put them to bed and kind of did the whole routine, but I knew that it was up for me. Like I needed to go get help. And that was my bottom.
That's amazing. It's not always the grand mal seizures, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is the quiet, subtle, like, this is it for me. I'm
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
So you go to rehab and meet Mr. Wonderful.
I do. I meet him the hour after I check in. So I went, I'd never been away from my kids for such a long period of time. I was going to be gone from them for 30 days. I didn't know how long it was actually going to, they won't tell you. They're very smart. They're like approximately 30 days. That is our standard, length of treatment. And I was trying to pin them down. They wouldn't be pinned down. But I was distraught. I was bereft. I did not want to leave my children. I left crying. I arrived crying. I cried through the entire orientation. And then I decided to leave. And so I left the orientation in the middle of it. And I ran to the administrative office, hoping that I could get my phone back, because I had to surrender my phone so that I could call my then almost ex-husband and ask him to come back and get me. And the facility director, God bless him, he wouldn't let me check out. He convinced me to stay. And during that time period, when I came out of his office, Scott, who I call Scott S412, because that's what his badge said, Scott S, and then 412, that was his patient number. He was there in the office when I got out, and we had a conversation that I honestly don't remember most of. They had given me some medication to kind of calm me down. So I was feeling that. I was quite happy about that medication. And the only thing I really remember him saying is, I hear they've got a pretty good chef here. And I was just like, really? They have a good chef? That's crazy. And then, he became my very good friend in treatment. He was romantically attracted to me, I think, before I was aware of my attraction to him.
Mm.
I was not checking for anybody at all. I was just getting through it. But he ended up, kissing me about 2 weeks into our stay, and I was shocked. Like you could have knocked me over. I was so shocked. I was like, oh my God, he kissed me. Like, was I giving off vibes that I wanted to, I didn't understand. And then by the end of our stay there, I was trying to kiss him, and he was like, no, we should wait. So we weren't like a rehab hookup. We didn't actually do anything in treatment. And then he went back to Utah and I came back to LA. And later he moved here because it's where he was in Utah. There was just like no recovery meetings, and it was really difficult. And he was by himself in a home that he left with all the bottles still there. And, it was just the same as what he had left. And it was difficult for him. So he came here and lived in a sober living. And we stayed connected, throughout that time, he and I.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, and when was that? Was that 2008?
2008.
Ooh, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Yes.
As I like to say. No, I love it hearing those stories that work out, and we live these lives of recovery and with a common understanding and foundation. Some people are afraid to be in a relationship with somebody that's in recovery, because there's always that potential for relapse. And you talk a little bit about, part 3 was the language of letting go. And do you want to share a little bit about your experience with that letting go piece?
Well, there are two things I was letting go of. And one was, so when Scott moved here, Scott he drank again after treatment, just for a few months. So his sobriety date is in December, mine is in August of the same year.
Okay.
So I talk about those 4 months. They seem like a long time in the book because it felt like a long time to me then. But really, you looking back anyway, so it's just a few months. But so he had drank again, and I was counseled by the now like recovery team I had in my life that I needed to let him have the dignity of his own experience. And I had to stay in my own lane and focus on my own recovery, because the kind of mission that I had been given was that I needed to put my recovery first before everything. And so when he actually finished drinking and got sober, we came up with a batting order for ourselves. And that was that our recovery, our respective recoveries came first, always. That meant if it was a choice between a meeting and hanging out with him, I went to the meeting. You know, if it's a choice between taking a call from him and taking a call from a fellow in the program, I take the call from the fellow. So that meant I had to put everything recovery first in my life. Second thing in the batting order was our respective families, really our children, but also our parents at that time. So the first thing that came first is our recoveries came first, then our respective families. And the third thing was everything else, basically. Everything else came third, including each other.
Mhm.
So whatever that looked like, we could be in there, but we had to come third. And that was really helpful in the letting go piece of that, because then I could let go of trying to manage his recovery and how it impacted me.
Mhm.
Like, would I stay sober if he didn't? We got sober at the same time. We met in treatment. So that was all kind of, I was sorting all that stuff out then and trying to be really, honestly, Arlena, everything was geared toward, I want to be a mom to my kids. I want to be, that's all, that was my mantra.
Yeah.
That was my mantra. I want to be a mom to my kids. How do I stay present or be present in my children's lives? How do I show up for them and give them the mom that they deserve? So everything had to be geared toward that for me. So in that respect, Scott was more of a distraction, right? Because he wasn't really adding to that. He did eventually, but at that point in time, he wasn't. So I really had to let him and his recovery be what it was and then concentrate on my own. And so while I'm in the rooms of recovery, I find out that there is a person who is feeding information to my now ex-husband's divorce attorney. And the information looks like I'm showing up at meetings with this man and we're all over each other, and I'm not taking my recovery seriously. It's what it looks like. That's what gets back to him. And the truth was, if you saw Scott and I, you would probably know that we knew each other, but we certainly were really careful. Like, even though these meetings are confidential, we knew these are human beings, right? We're not going to just fall all over each other in meetings. No PDA at all. And yet someone was feeding this to my ex-husband's attorney. And I had to then kind of take stock and see if this was someplace I could stay, these recovery rooms, because I was not safe anymore. And that was a series of conversations and contemplations. And I decided that this person was not worth me losing my recovery. Like, if I left those rooms, I would lose everything.
Right.
And everything in me said, run. This isn't safe. You've got to get out of here. There's got to be another way. But I stayed. And this person's still around, the person that dimed on me. That's what I call it.
That was cute. That's yeah.
And it's, I don't have I almost never think about this person. I don't resent them. I don't wish them any ill will. Yeah. And that scene where I described having them sit next to me at that meeting was 100% true.
So good.
There was no other seat, and they had no idea that I knew what was going on. So they asked if they could sit next to me, and I ended up, holding their hand during the closing prayer and really letting it go.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. It sort of brings up this idea that, we go to these meetings to be vulnerable and tell the truth and be honest. But it's not always a safe place. Like there are measures to maintain our safety. I eventually went to women's meetings, but it doesn't matter. We always have to, you can't tell everything to everybody. You just have to tell everything to at least
Yes.
somebody.
Well, and our suggestion to us is to share in a general way. And so
Yeah.
And that's always what I've tried to do.
Mhm,
Um, like you said, women's meetings, I can be a little bit more specific about things that are going on because I think it's helpful there
mhm.
for me.
Yeah,
And in co-ed meetings, I'm a little bit more general for the
right.
most part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're a busy girl these days,
Um,
but I really enjoyed another chance to sit with you and talk about the stories. I know it's a tremendous work to, get it all out. So what a gift to the world this book is. You did such an amazing job. I want everyone to read it. I'll leave links to everything in the show notes along with your first episode. Is there anything oh, wait, and you're in the TED Talk, you good
well, thank
great
you.
job
Yeah,
on the TED Talk, I'll leave a
thank
link.
you.
Is there anything else that any other resources you'd like to share?
Um, Not at this time, but I'll send it to you, a link to my book tour. So
Ooh,
I'll send
so
you that link.
fun.
It's shaping up to be really nice. I'm very excited about it. So
Yeah.
I'll be a traveling woman the next those few
On
months. So
tour. You're doing a
yes,
tour. That's
yes.
amazing. Well, congratulations on your book, and I can't wait to follow your career. You've been doing amazing things, and thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so much, Arlena, for having me. Like I said, a second time. I feel very fortunate and I really appreciate you.
Of course. Thanks so much.